We got an interesting one today, Miami Dolphins fans, as we're previewing the position of tight end for the 2023 NFL offseason for your Miami Dolphins on the Fins Up Network. And it's interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, the obvious, the elephant in the room, the Mike Gesicki era. Although we all love him as a player, we all love him as a person and as a teammate, likely over. But man, just that pursuit of trying to find that guy that can stay on the field more often than not, that can block, that can pass block, that can run block, and can also catch the ball in the open field and make plays. That guy that can constantly stay on the field. Because we didn't really have that in 2022. The Mike Gesicki franchise tag thing sort of failed, a failed experiment. He had his moments here and there, but more often than not, we just left ourselves wanting more from Mike Gesicki in 2022. But the main question we got to ask ourselves when it comes to the tight end position moving forward to this Miami Dolphins offense, it's does Mike McDaniel, does he prioritize having that do-it-all tight end, that guy that can become an actual pass catcher and actually receive a bulk of the targets? Because we saw so many targets funneled to the wide receiver position in 2022, specifically to Waddle and Hill. I mean, there wasn't even a third wide receiver that truly emerged as like a outright target share kind of guy that you had to account for. Trent Sherfield was there every once in a while. Cedric Wilson got very minimal run. River Craycraft got very minimal run. But it's not like Mike Gesicki and Durham Smythe and all those guys were hogging shares either. So you kind of got to ask yourself, does Mike McDaniel prioritize that kind of tight end that can really dominate the game as a pass catcher role? So that's going to be a huge thing that we ask throughout this offseason. And based on how the Dolphins treat this position this offseason, if they land a bigger name free agent, if they spend high draft capital on a tight end prospect in the draft, maybe he does prioritize. If we see him kind of take a lesser tier, a lesser need approach at tight end, then maybe we have our answer. Maybe we don't need one of those guys. But we're going to talk about the guys we had in 22. We're going to talk about the free agents. We're going to talk about the NFL draft guys. But as we always do, want to hear from you. Drop your prospects in there. What NFL draft prospects at tight ends do you have your eye on? What free agents do you have your eye on? Who would you like the Dolphins to pursue at the position this offseason? Go ahead, drop those in the comments. Let's go from there. But let's talk about what we were working with here with 2022, the pass catchers that we had. Because as you'll see, Adam Shaheen literally was with the team this offseason for about a week before he went on IR. And then Mike Gesicki enters free agency. Unlikely we tag him again. Unlikely that he resigns. So we're assuming he walks, which leaves you with Durham Smythe, Hunter Long, Cethan Carter, and Tanner Connor. Now, of those guys, who has proven that they can be your team's tight end one, your blocking guy, your pass catching guy, your do-it-all on the field every single down play? Well, no one. That's your short answer. Now, I like what some of these guys bring to the table. I like Durham Smythe as a blocker. He was like a de facto extra tackle in a lot of situations last year. We helped on the edge. We helped our tackles more than any other team in the NFL last year. And Durham Smythe was a big part of that. So you like what he does as a blocker. He doesn't get called upon to do too much as a pass catcher, as you can see from his numbers right there. Kind of a bailout, last option kind of guy. So he doesn't really bring you too much as a pass catcher. Well, there comes Hunter Long, who, when you brought him in a couple of years ago, drafted him out of Boston College, believe he was a third rounder. So you got some decent draft capital invested in Hunter Long. And I thought last year, going back to last offseason, we wanted to see a giant step forward for Hunter Long. Prove that he can be the successor to Mike Gesicki. Well, guess what? He didn't. He didn't catch a single ball, showed some decent blocking when he got on the field towards the end of the season, but nothing was consistent from Hunter Long. So we honestly, at this point, you kind of just have a wild card with Hunter Long. You can't really plan for him. You can almost just kind of plan on him being in the mix. Cethan Carter essentially missed the entire season with his concussion that he ended up having. I don't even know if he ends up making this team. He could be a cut along the way. We'll see. And then Tanner Connor, you essentially have your project tight end right there because he's new to the position, didn't play tight end in college, was a wide receiver, was a fast guy. So he's got all the athleticism, but he's lighter as well. So you don't really know how he's going to project in that blocking role. He's almost like this hybrid guy that you could get snaps here and there. So he's a guy that'll remain in competition for a roster spot. That's not even guaranteed at this point in time. But like I said, we're still looking for that that every down tight end that can do it all. Now, whether or not, like I said, does Mike McDaniel prioritize that? This offseason is going to tell us a lot. So let's look at some of these guys that are going to be available in free agent, because honestly, it's a decent grouping of guys in regards to free agency. But at the end of the day, you just got to be kind of unsure as to how much the Dolphins are willing to pay one of these guys. Because a lot of people have Dalton Schultz kind of as that number one guy. A lot of people think the Jags will end up re-signing Evan Ingram. But Dalton Schultz has kind of come on the last few seasons for the Cowboys, a decent blocker. Obviously, he's got the pass catching thing down. So he's got the potential to kind of be that do-it-all tight end. But at the end of the day, are the Dolphins going to spend that kind of money? I mean, we already see him not spending high dollars on Mike Gesicki. Now, granted, Gesicki doesn't block quite as well as Schultz or some of the other names you're going to see on here. So maybe the Dolphins would pay for more of a guy that can do it all. But if you're not paying Gesicki, you got to believe that they're not probably going to put too much top dollar into the position. So the guys I then shift my focus onto, you got your Austin Hoopers, your Hayden Hursts of the world. Foster Moreau is a name to keep an eye on. He's still young. He's been kind of buried at the position behind Darren Waller there with the Raiders. So keep your eye on him. Irv Smith never really never really hit his potential coming out of Bama, but he's got some history there with Tua, obviously playing at college at the same time. It's not like he was putting up huge numbers there. He was more so drafted kind of on his athleticism and potential. But like I said, never really hit it. I mean, the Vikings ended up trading halfway through the season for TJ Hawkinson. So it kind of shows you what they think of Irv Smith right there. They're likely going to let him walk. And then another kind of sneaky name on this list, Ross Dwelley. And if you think about him, not necessarily as much in a pass catcher role, but he's a little bit of that hybrid. And obviously playing with the 49ers, has the ties to Mike McDaniel that way. Obviously got some tutoring and learning behind Greg Kittle for all of those years he was there. And Dwelley, when he was called upon, he actually did fine for the 49ers. He put up some decent numbers a couple of years back. Like I said, he's not scared to get in there and do some blocking. That's more so me making a connection with Mike McDaniel and obviously his previous history with the 49ers. So at least a couple of guys to keep your eye on here if the Dolphins were to test things out in free agency. But in the draft, this is where things get a little bit interesting more from my perspective anyways. Because I have got on good authority the Dolphins like Michael Mayer, but I also have it on good authority just through assumption that a lot of teams like Mayer from Notre Dame. He's going to be gone before the Dolphins pick. You can see right there the draft picks on top, number 51 in the second. You got 2/3, and then you got the late rounders with the 6th and the 7th. But man, look at some of these guys that are going to end up going pretty early. You got Mayer, you've got Washington, you've got Kincaid, you've got Musgrave. All of these guys, you'll see there that some of them are projected based on the NFL mock draft database to go in that first and second round. I tell you what, though, I've seen mock drafts with not necessarily in the same mock draft, but a variety of mock drafts that have had each one of those names end up being in a first rounder. Right before I recorded this, I was watching NFL Network. Actually, they were showing the Dolphins 49ers game from this previous year, where we started out with a bang with that touchdown to Sherfield, and then it all sort of went downhill from there. But on the bottom line, they had one of their draft analysts with his mock draft, and he actually had Luke Musgrave going 15 overall. Now, to be honest with you, that's my guy. I'm looking forward to doing his draft player profile here as we get closer to draft time, because he can do it all. There's some questions about his blocking, but to be completely honest with you, he's not a bad blocker, and I think he'll only get better. But man, he stretches the seam. He is that pass catching tight end, and you're not going to see too much of him from recent, because he actually only played in, I think it was 1 or 2 games last year at Oregon State. He ended up having an injury, but that potential is there. That frame is there. That ability to stretch that seam while also being a pretty damn good blocker is there. So we'll go into more depth in him in a later date here with a player profile. But Washington, Kincaid, Laporta, Tucker Kraft out of the small school, South Dakota State there. You've got a lot of guys here that are going to be projected to come off the board in that second, third round range. So like I said, the draft also might be an indication as to how Mike McDaniel really views this position moving forward. Is it going to be a position where targets, yes, are coming? Or, you know what, it's more of an afterthought. We need bodies. We need guys that can block and then can kind of be used as that safety valve, almost like another Durham Smythe. So we'll kind of see how that goes. Gonna jump that off the screen real quick. Well, like I said, I don't foresee the Dolphins really going into 2023 with it just being Durham Smythe and Hunter Long kind of as those primary guys. I really do think they'll add to the position, but we're going to see how they handle free agency. And that might tell us if, hey, they're going to end up taking a tight end in rounds 2 or 3. Because if they go splash free agent signing, or if they even take like a mediocre free agent signing, maybe they ignore the position. Maybe they continue to try to develop a guy like Hunter Long, like Tanner Connor. So that's going to tell us a lot. So keep your eye on free agency and how they handle the tight end position here this offseason. And then maybe we'll see more about how they do for the draft. But that is what I got for my offseason tight end preview. But like I said, who's your ideal guy? What's your ideal fix for this position? Who replaces Mike Gesicki? You got a free agent. You got a draft prospect you'd like to see this team target. Drop that guy's name into the comments. Curious to see who you've got. I've got one more of these left. I'm doing the safeties. If you haven't been subscribed yet, make sure you are getting subscribed. Check out all the positions. We're doing 10 in total. Like I said, the next one that drops, safeties, will be the 10th and final one. So thanks to everyone that has been checking them out. These are a blast to do. Love to really get a preview and an overview of what the positions may look like here and what we may be targeting throughout the offseason as Dolphins fans. So that's what I've got for today, everybody. And until next time, fins up.